The morning sun glimmered faintly over the ocean when I arrived at the beach house, expecting the same peaceful silence that had always welcomed me for the past 20 years. But that morning, as soon as I stepped out of the car, I felt something was wrong. Loud music blared from inside, laughter echoed through the walls, and the faint scent of burnt food hung in the air. My heart skipped a beat when I saw unfamiliar cars parked haphazardly in my driveway. The once trimmed grass I had cared for so lovingly was now littered with beer cans and crushed soda bottles. My flower pots, those red geraniums I had nurtured every summer, were being used as goalposts by a group of children playing soccer. I stood there, keys trembling in my hand, staring at the chaos that had consumed my sanctuary. And then she appeared, Megan, my daughter-in-law. Her sharp voice cut through the air before I could even step inside. "Why is that old parasite here? We have no room for you." The words slapped harder than any physical blow. She stood on the terrace, arms folded, eyes full of contempt. She was wearing my apron, the one I had embroidered with my own hands years ago, and that simple sight broke something inside me. "Megan," I began softly, forcing calm into my voice. "I didn't know you were here. This is my house. I always come here on weekends." She laughed, not a laugh of amusement, but a cruel, victorious laugh that made me feel small in the home I had built. "Oh, please," she sneered. "Robert told me we could use the house for as long as we wanted. We're actually doing something productive here. You just come to complain." Behind her, a crowd emerged. Her mother, her sister Veronica, some teenagers, even strangers I had never seen before. They all stared at me as though I were an intruder. Her mother whispered something to Megan, smirking. "So this is the famous mother-in-law. I thought she'd be more impressive." Laughter followed, cold and mocking. I could feel the humiliation rising up my throat, but I refused to let them see my pain. "Where's Robert?" I asked, desperate for the sight of my son. Megan's expression hardened. "Working. Unlike you, he has responsibilities. And honestly, Eleanor, there's no room for you here. All the bedrooms are taken. You'll only make everyone uncomfortable." I froze, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. Was she actually throwing me out of my own house? The house I had built brick by brick after my husband died. "This house is mine," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. "I have the documents. I pay every bill." "Enough," she snapped. "Robert is your son. What's yours is his, and what's his is mine. That's how families work, don't they?" Her words sliced deep, and I felt the sting of every eye watching me. Even the children had gone silent. The humiliation burned, but I would not cry. One of the teenagers sneered. "Why don't you just go to a hotel?" I forced a smile that felt like breaking glass. "It's fine, dear," I said quietly. "I understand." Megan smirked in triumph, believing she had won. As I turned and walked away, I looked once more at my home, the garden, the walls, the windows, and remembered how much of myself was in every corner of that house. My feet carried me away, but my heart stayed behind, trapped in the ruins of what used to be my pride and peace. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought I would vanish quietly. But they didn't know that beneath this wrinkled skin beat the heart of a woman who had built everything from nothing, who had buried her husband and raised her son alone, who had faced storms greater than their cruelty. Megan had just made the gravest mistake of her life. She had awakened the strength I had buried deep within me. When I reached my car and sat behind the wheel, my trembling hands could barely fit the key into the ignition. The sound of their laughter still echoed behind me, piercing like sharp needles into my chest. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I looked at the house through the windshield. My house, now filled with strangers and noise, didn't look like mine anymore. It looked like someone had stolen 20 years of my life and replaced them with chaos. As I sat there, tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't change anything. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remember the beginning. The days when that house was nothing more than a dream drawn on paper. 20 years earlier, I was a widow with only a sewing machine, a small apartment, and a son who depended on me for everything. Robert was 25, full of plans and energy, but I was already 50, carrying grief and exhaustion like weights around my neck. Yet, one morning I stood before an empty lot by the sea, the salty wind blowing through my graying hair, and I promised myself that I would build a home that no one could ever take away from me. It had taken me years to save the money. I worked from dawn until late at night, sewing school uniforms, wedding dresses, curtains, even patching up torn trousers for neighbors. My fingers bled countless times, but every drop of blood was a stone in the foundation of my dream. I still remember the look on the architect's face when I told him I wanted to build a beach house. He tried to hide his skepticism. "Mrs. Crawford, this will cost you at least $45,000, he said. I opened my old savings book, trembling but proud, and showed him the amount. Every penny was there, earned honestly, saved painfully. Robert was beside me, smiling like a child seeing his future for the first time. "Mom, are we really going to have a beach house?" he asked with such excitement that I forgot how tired I was. "We're not just going to have one," I told him. "We're going to build it with our own hands." And we did. For 2 long years, every weekend, I drove from the city to the coast to supervise construction. I mixed cement, painted walls, and planted trees in the garden. Robert came whenever his college schedule allowed. He carried wood planks, painted fences, and laughed every time the sea wind made our hair wild. I remember the day we chose the kitchen tiles, creamy and soft, just the right shade to catch the morning light. When we finally placed the last stone and saw the house complete, Robert hugged me tightly and said, "Mom, you're the strongest woman I've ever known." I can still feel his arms around me, his voice trembling with pride. Back then we were a team. We had faced poverty together, loneliness together, life together. That house wasn't just a structure. It was a symbol of our survival. It was proof that love and perseverance could create something beautiful out of sorrow. Every object in that house had meaning. The dining table came from the extra money I earned after 3 months of working without rest. The curtains were hand-sewn from discounted fabric I found at a clothing store. The kitchen pots were bought with the money I saved by not buying new clothes for a whole year. Every nail, every flower, every painting carried a story. When Robert married Megan, I believed she would understand that. First, she seemed to. She called me Mother Crawford and helped me cook. She brought flowers from the market and admired my garden. I thought she respected the work behind those walls. But slowly, the compliments turned into criticism, and the affection into cold politeness. She began suggesting changes: modern furniture, brighter colors, more space for future family gatherings. I ignored it at first. Love for my son blinded me. I thought she was just trying to make the place her own. But now, sitting in the car, watching her walk freely around what I had built with my bare hands, I realized the truth. She hadn't wanted to share the house. She had wanted to take it from me. Megan had probably been planning this for years, testing boundaries, manipulating Robert, waiting for the right moment to claim what was never hers. And Robert, my son, my only son, had allowed it. That realization was heavier than any heartbreak. I leaned back, eyes closed, remembering the boy who once told me he would always protect me. The boy who held my hand when his father's coffin was lowered into the ground. The boy who said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll never leave you alone." Where was that boy now? How could he have forgotten who I was? The night settled over the sea like a dark blanket, and I finally started the car. The hotel I found was small, old, and overpriced, but it didn't matter. As I checked in, the clerk smiled kindly, unaware that he was giving a room to a woman who had just been exiled from her own home. I sat by the window, listening to the waves, and made a silent vow. This wasn't over. I had lost my husband to death, but I wouldn't lose my dignity to greed. Megan had declared war, and I had just begun to plan my defense. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Sleep had refused to come, chased away by the endless replay of Megan's laughter and the image of strangers sleeping in my living room. I made myself a cup of coffee in the small hotel kettle and stared out at the ocean, its waves crashing rhythmically, almost like a voice whispering to me, "Don't give up." I had spent my whole life fighting to keep what was mine. I wasn't about to surrender now. At 7:30, I dressed neatly, tied my hair back, and drove toward the beach house. My heart pounded in my chest, but I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this was a misunderstanding. Robert would come and explain. Megan would apologize. Families fight, I told myself. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. But when I arrived, the sight before me killed the last bit of hope I had left. My own front door, was locked. I stood there with my keys, but the locks had been changed. My hand froze in midair, the metal key useless between my fingers. I rang the bell, my stomach twisting. It was Veronica, Megan's sister, who opened the door. Her hair was messy, and she looked annoyed, like I had interrupted her peace. "Oh, it's you again," she said flatly. "What do you want now?" I forced a polite smile. "Good morning, dear. I came to collect a few of my personal things and speak with Megan." She crossed her arms. "Megan is sleeping. And your things aren't in the house anymore. We packed them in bags and left them in the garage so they wouldn't get in the way." My things. In bags. In the garage. For a moment I couldn't move. "What do you mean, my things? This is my home. Everything in there belongs to me." She shrugged, unfazed. "Look, lady, I don't want drama." Megan explained everything. Robert said it was fine for them to use the house. "So please don't start yelling. You're making it awkward." I stepped past her, ignoring her protests. The moment I entered, I stopped cold. The smell hit me first, a blend of cigarette smoke, spoiled food, and cheap perfume. My living room looked like a disaster zone. Clothes were scattered everywhere, and someone had moved my furniture to make space for inflatable mattresses. My once elegant wicker chairs were now covered with wet towels and crumbs. On the coffee table lay beer bottles, half-eaten pizza boxes, and a sticky mess of spilled soda. The rug I had bought on my wedding anniversary was ruined with stains. My eyes filled with tears, but I blinked them away. I walked into the kitchen and gasped. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, my once shining stove blackened with grease. My pots, the same ones I had saved for months to buy, were covered in burned food. "Where are my china plates?" I whispered, already dreading the answer. Veronica yawned. "Oh, some broke. The kids were playing. Megan said they were old anyway." "It's fine. Old anyway." The words echoed in my ears, mocking me. My plates, the delicate porcelain ones I had bought one by one, were not old. They were history. The only luxury I had allowed myself after years of sewing until my hands hurt. I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. My bedroom door was open, and the sight that greeted me made my stomach twist. Megan's mother was inside, humming cheerfully as she folded my clothes, and packed them into garbage bags. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" She turned casually. "Oh, don't worry. I'm helping organize. Megan told me you weren't using this room anymore. We needed the space for the kids." I looked past her and saw two small children sleeping in my bed, their muddy shoes still on the blanket. My favorite pillows were on the floor, stained with something dark. My heart pounded in my ears. "Ma'am, I need you to move these children." "This is my room," I said, my voice breaking. She chuckled. "Your room? Oh please, Megan said you didn't need it anymore. You should be grateful they're taking care of this place. You never used it much anyway." I stood there, frozen, as she zipped one of the bags containing my dresses I had sewn myself with care and memory. It felt as though someone was burying pieces of my life in plastic. "You have no right," I began, but the words died in my throat. What was the point? They didn't see me as a person anymore. To them, I was an inconvenience, an obstacle. I turned and went downstairs, my steps shaky but determined. I found Megan on the terrace, sitting comfortably with a cup of coffee, in my favorite mug, wearing my housecoat. She was talking on the phone, laughing lightly. "Yes, Mom," she said. "Everything's perfect. Don't worry, I already handled the situation with the old woman." She won't bother us anymore. My chest tightened. She hung up when she saw me, her expression turning cold. You again. Didn't I make myself clear? We need to talk, I said firmly. This house is mine. I have all the documents. Pay every tax and bill. Robert had no right to give you permission to take over my property. She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't start with that nonsense again. Robert is your son. What's yours is his, and what's his is mine. We're family, remember? Family doesn't treat each other this way, I said, my voice rising. You broke my plates, destroyed my furniture, threw my clothes into bags. We did you a favor, she interrupted smugly. Most of that stuff was old junk anyway. It's time this place got a makeover. Could hardly breathe. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding with rage. Where is Robert? I demanded. I already told you, she said coolly, sipping her coffee. He's working. But don't worry, he agrees with me. It was his idea, actually, to use this house for something useful instead of leaving it empty. It's a waste for you to keep it to yourself. Her words cut through me like ice. Robert, my son, my own flesh and blood. Had he really said that? My body went numb, but something deep inside me hardened like steel. I stepped closer, my voice low and calm. You have until tomorrow, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Tomorrow morning, you and your family will be gone from this house. Megan let out a cruel laugh. And if we're not? You'll call the police. Sue your son. Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor. You can't do anything to us. We're family. I smiled, not out of kindness, but out of something far colder. You're right, I said softly. We are family. And soon you'll understand what that truly means. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her on the terrace, unaware that she had just made an enemy of a woman who had nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I returned to the house pretending I had forgotten something, just to observe quietly, to see with my own eyes what had become of my home. I parked the car at the edge of the property so they wouldn't hear the engine. As I approached, I could hear music and laughter again, and my stomach turned. Through the window, I saw Megan dancing with her sister in the living room, the same place where my husband and I had once celebrated our anniversaries. They had moved the furniture aside, opened bottles of wine, and were treating my home as if it were a vacation resort. Their children ran up and down the stairs, dragging sand all over the wooden floors I used to polish every weekend. I watched in silence, my heart aching but my mind razor sharp. Rage alone was useless. I needed a plan. I returned to the hotel, sat by the window, and began writing a list. I wrote down everything that was mine. Every object, every bill, every document. For years I had been careful with paperwork, keeping every receipt, every property tax record, every photograph from the day the house was built. I wasn't some helpless old lady. I was Eleanor Crawford, the woman who had turned grief into survival, and survival into strength. That night I called my lawyer, an old friend named Mr. Graham who had helped me once before when I bought the house. His voice was warm but worried when he heard the tremor in mine. Eleanor, what's going on? He asked. I explained everything, the invasion, the broken plates, the humiliation. There was a long silence. They have no legal right, he finally said. If the property is entirely in your name, no one, not even your son, can authorize someone to live there without your consent. His words felt like oxygen. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. We'll handle this discreetly, he continued. Don't confront them again. I'll prepare the documents and contact the authorities. But I'll need you to gather proof. Photographs, witness statements if possible, and copies of all property records. I thanked him and hung up. Then I took a deep breath and began to prepare for war. Not the kind fought with fists or screams, but with intelligence and patience. The next morning I returned to the house early, just as the sun began to rise. The front lawn was a mess of beer bottles and paper plates, the air heavy with the smell of stale smoke. I walked around quietly, taking photographs with my phone. The broken flower pots, the cigarette butts, the stained furniture. All of it. Every corner told a story of disrespect. I even filmed Megan's mother yelling at one of the children for spilling juice on the carpet. "This isn't my house," she shouted. "It's that old woman's junk place anyway." The words stung, but I kept recording. By the time I returned to the hotel, I had enough evidence to fill an entire folder. That afternoon, I went to the local notary office, where the clerk recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Crawford, it's been a while," he said with a kind smile. I showed him my property papers, the tax receipts, and explained what had happened. He shook his head in disbelief. "They're trespassing, ma'am. You have every right to remove them legally. I'll help you notarize the copies for your case." His kindness steadied me. By evening, all my documents were neatly organized in a folder labeled "Property of Eleanor Crawford." I placed it beside my bed, touching it gently like a weapon forged from truth. That night I called Robert. It took 3 rings before he answered, his voice weary. "Mom, I'm at work," he said quickly. "Can we talk later?" "No, Robert," I said firmly. "We'll talk now." There was silence on the line. "Megan told me everything," he said eventually. "You've been difficult, Mom. You don't like to share." "Share?" I interrupted, my voice shaking but strong. "Robert, I built that house with my hands. You were there. You watched me save every penny, so until my fingers bled. That house is my soul carved in bricks, and your wife has turned it into a circus." He sighed, a sound full of distance. "Mom, please don't exaggerate. Megan just wants the family to enjoy the place. You don't go there often anymore." "Because I'm old," I said bitterly. "Because I've become invisible." There was another silence. I could hear his breath, uneasy. "Robert," I said quietly, "when your father died, I built that house for us. I didn't need luxury. I needed a purpose. You promised you'd protect me, but you let her throw me out like trash. Tell me, son, does that make you proud?" He didn't answer. I could hear a faint tremor in his voice before he whispered, "I didn't know it was that bad, Mom." "It's worse," I said. "But you don't have to worry. I'll handle it myself." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were trembling, not from weakness but from the fire burning inside me. That night, I stood before the mirror and looked at my reflection. I saw lines of age and sorrow, but behind them I saw strength, the same strength that had carried me through widowhood, poverty, and loneliness. They thought I was powerless. They had mistaken silence for surrender. But silence was my strategy. Tomorrow the law would speak for me. And when it did, Megan Dyson would finally understand that Eleanor Crawford was not a helpless old woman. She was the storm she had unleashed herself. The next morning was quiet, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. I woke early, dressed in a clean white blouse, and tied my hair neatly as I used to when I worked. My hands no longer trembled. They were steady with purpose. The ocean air felt cool against my skin as I drove toward the beach house one last time. I wasn't going there to plead or argue. I was going there to reclaim what was mine. When I arrived, 2 police cars were already parked outside, their lights flashing faintly in the early light. Mr. Graham stood near the gate, holding a folder, his face calm and professional. I walked toward him, my heart thudding with a strange mix of fear and satisfaction. "Are you ready, Mrs. Crawford?" he asked quietly. "I've been ready my whole life," I said. He nodded, then turned to the officers and spoke with authority. The officers approached the house, knocked once, and then entered. From the porch I could hear shouting, Megan's voice rising in indignation, her mother's shrill protests, the confused cries of the children. I stood still, watching from a distance, my fingers gripping the strap of my purse. For years, I had believed confrontation was unladylike. That day, I learned that dignity sometimes demands noise. The officers soon emerged, followed by Megan and her family. Megan looked disheveled, barefoot, clutching a robe around her. Her face was pale with shock and anger. "You did this," she hissed at me. "You called the police on your own family." I looked at her, my voice calm. Family. Family doesn't take what isn't theirs. Family doesn't destroy what someone has built with love. You stopped being my family the moment you threw me out of my own home. She glared at me, her jaw trembling. Robert will never forgive you for this. Then he'll have to learn what forgiveness really means, I said softly. One of the officers handed her the eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, he said firmly. Any belongings left behind will be considered property of the homeowner. Megan opened her mouth to argue, but Mr. Graham cut her off politely. The documents are clear. This property belongs solely to Mrs. Eleanor Crawford. Any unauthorized occupation is a criminal offense. You may contact your attorney, but I assure you it won't change the outcome. Megan's sister muttered something under her breath, but none of them dared defy the officers. Slowly, bitterly, they began gathering their things. As I watched them carry out bags and boxes, I felt no joy, only a deep, aching relief. Every broken plate, every insult, every tear I had shed seemed to dissolve into the morning air. I wasn't proud of the pain this moment caused, but I was proud of my strength to endure it. When the last car drove away, leaving a cloud of dust on the road, the house finally fell silent. I walked up to the porch, turned the key in the lock, and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Stale, suffocating. I opened all the windows, letting the ocean breeze sweep through the rooms. Dust floated in the sunlight, like ghosts of the past being exorcised. Room by room I began to clean. I picked up broken shards of my china, swept the floor, washed the dishes. Took hours, maybe all day, but I didn't stop. My back ached, my knees hurt, but there was peace in every movement. Each corner I cleaned felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By evening, the house looked almost like it used to. I lit a candle and sat by the window, watching the sea. The setting sun painted the sky with gold and crimson, and I realized that for the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't heavy. Later that night there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Robert standing there. His face pale and eyes downcast. He looked smaller somehow, like the boy I used to scold for stealing cookies. "Mom," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I didn't speak." He stepped inside slowly, looking around at the half-restored living room. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Megan told me you'd agreed. That you didn't mind them staying here. I thought she was helping you." I sighed, the weight of years between us pressing heavily on my chest. "You didn't think, Robert. That's the problem. You trusted her more than you trusted your own mother." He nodded, shame washing over his face. "She's gone," I said simply. "And she won't come back." He sat down, his voice trembling. "I'll make it right, Mom. Promise. I'll pay for the repairs, replace what was broken." I shook my head gently. "Money can't fix what was broken, Robert. But maybe time can." I turned toward the window again. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was sad but honest. After a few minutes, he stood up to leave. "Do you want me to stay with you tonight?" he asked. I looked at him and smiled faintly. "No, my dear. I'll be fine. For the first time in a long while, I'll truly be fine." When he left, I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, breathing deeply. The house was mine again, not just in paper or law, but in spirit. Every wall, every window seemed to whisper my name back to me. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and listened to the waves. The moon rose slowly, its reflection shimmering on the water like a promise. Life had taken much from me. My husband, my peace, even my son for a while. But it hadn't taken me. That night, as the ocean whispered under the stars, I realized something profound. I had spent years waiting for others to protect me, to see my worth, to give me peace. But peace isn't something people give you. Something you take back when you finally remember who you are. I was Eleanor Crawford. A mother, a widow, a builder, and a survivor. And though they had tried to erase me, I had written myself back into my own story.